Good afternoon, and welcome to CabWriter Comprehensive 3, Part 2. Today we're going to begin drawing the model in front of you. We're going to do two things. First, we're going to draw the walls, and secondly, we're going to draw one 3-box cabinet. That's going to be our total goal for today, and we're going to take it slow. I want to explain the details of how to draw walls and the details of the story stick in particular. Once we have that down, in part 3 we can begin to move along and move along pretty quickly. So with that in mind, I've taken the time offline to create a layout of the walls. And here it is. This is all of the dimensions for the wall that we will need. Typically what you'll do is go to a client's house, and if it's a kitchen or something like that, whether it's a closet or an entertainment center, what you're concerned with is the inside dimensions of the wall and any obstructions. So if it's a kitchen and you have some plumbing obstructions, you want to make sure you note where those are, and we're going to include those in the drawing. Any windows or doors or any other kind of obstruction. And what we need to do is include in that obstruction the trim. Now, you don't have to actually draw the windows like I've done here. You could put a rectangle and punch it through. Just make sure if you do that, if you take that shortcut, that the rectangle you produce and push through includes the outside edges of the trim. If you're only doing one room, then the thickness of the walls aren't a big issue. But if you're doing more than one room and some of the other rooms of the other side of the walls, then you want to get the thickness of the walls correct. So those are details you have to pay attention to. But other than that, what we want is the obstructions and all of the dimensions that are going to allow us to lay out cabinets offline, that is, away from the client's house. All right, so when you download CabWriter Comprehensive Part 3, you'll get two things. One is you'll get a skip file for this model, and it'll have in it this wall layout that you can refer to. You'll probably also get it in a PDF, and of course it'll be in the video. So with that in mind, I'm going to take this out of the video, offline that is, so I can refer to it, and then you will be able to do the same thing with your model as you're following along in the video. Okay, with that in mind, let's open up a new file and let's get started. I've opened up a new SketchUp file. I haven't saved it yet. You can see right here it's untitled. And so I need to create a SketchUp CabWriter project. And that requires two steps. The first step is to save the file. It must be saved before I can create a CabWriter project. So I'm going to save it on my desktop. And normally I would save it as the name of the client that I'm working with. But in this case, because I'm going to have this video spread over a number of parts, I'm going to name each one the part number and prefix it with CabWriter Comprehensive 3. So I'll call this CabWriter Comprehensive 3 Part 2. And I think I've got that spelled correctly. So now that it's saved, I need to do the second part to create a CabWriter project, and that's to use this tool right here. I'll use this tool once and only once per project. What it does is it immediately opens the CabWriter settings dialog box. And normally what you would do is you would go through each one of these tabs, and there's 13 of them. You would go through each one of these tabs and make any changes that you wanted to reflect the design style that you're going to use for your cabinets. Now you may actually have to do this a number of times in a project, and we will actually do it a number of times in this project. But to save time, I've actually saved them in files. And so I'll show you that. If I go to the Open and Load CabWriter Defaults right here, this dialog box comes up. And if I look at this drop-down menu, you notice that there is a bunch of defaults that come with CabWriter for imperial units, and the same styles that come in metric units. You will probably see nothing down here when you first install CabWriter, but as you use CabWriter and you save defaults, this is where they'll go, and this list will grow, as mine has, and these will be defaults that you save for various types of cabinet styles that you're working on. Well, today we're going to do one 3-box basic cabinet. And so I'll load the basic CW3C basic defaults. And I'll come back to these a little later, but suffice it to say, I have now just changed the settings to draw the style of cabinet that I want to draw. So we'll close that. All right, so now I have a CabWriter project. In fact, if I look now, if I want to edit that project, notice it says the project name is CabWriter Comprehensive 3 Part 2. It uses the name of the project, in other words, the file name here, and puts that in the name of the project. So when you're naming your file, use a name that means something, and make sure that you use a name that's a legal folder name in whatever system you're using, Mac or the PC, and make sure that it's a legal file name, because this will be used to create other folders and file names when you create production documentation. This will be used to create file names and folder names. So make sure it's a valid name. Okay, with that said, we're now ready to begin. Now what we're going to do today is we're going to start off doing the walls and one 3-box cabinet. So let's start with the first wall, which I'm going to call the west wall. And I'm going to start using the Construct Walls tool right here. And right away it wants to know the name of the wall. Well, I'm going to call it West. Now it's important right now for you to notice that the only name I'm supplying is West. I'll come back to this in a moment. All right, the first thing we see is we have a dotted box. That dotted box is telling me that's an illegal wall. It is a hard and fast rule that your entire model in CabWriter must be in this positive, positive, positive quadrant. In other words, positive red, positive green, and positive blue quadrant. If any part of it, no matter how small, is outside of that positive, positive, positive quadrant, you will get this dotted box, which is telling you that's an illegal wall. So to fix this, I can hit the Control key. Notice as I move this icon and I keep tapping the Control key, I switched the side of the line that the wall is drawn on. So now that I've got it in the positive, positive, positive quadrant, it turns green. Now notice if I start to tip it like this. Well, there's a very small part of it down there in the lower right corner that is outside of that quadrant. And so the box turns to a dashed box. Same is true here. If I put any part of it outside that area into the negative red area, I'll get a dashed box telling me that that's not legal. All right, so what I want is I want a wall along the green axis, and I want it to be 192 inches long, which is 16 feet. So I'll type 192. And there's my first wall. Okay, now remember, I only supplied the name West for that wall. Let's see what happened. Notice it's on a layer called wall, space, west. So what happens is we give the wall a name. Could have been a number, could have been sink wall, or in that case I'd just call it sink, or refrigerator or something like that. It will take that name and it will prepend wall, space to that name, and that is the layer the wall would go on. The next thing it did is it named both the instance and definition name the same. This time it prepended it with capital C, capital W, underscore, capital W-A-L-L, space. So that's the prefix, CW wall, and whatever name I gave it. And that's the instance and definition name. So remember that naming nomenclature. The purpose for that, by the way, is you'll see in a moment as I add more walls that all of the wall layers will be together because of the wall, space. And they'll be, when you alphabetize this list, they'll all be together. The purpose of the CW_wall prefix is so that CabWriter can recognize it as a CabWriter component. All right, now let's draw the next wall. And again, I'm going to take the wall tool, and I want this wall to be the north wall. It'll start here and go out here. And it's going to be 240 inches long. Now, I didn't explain the type of wall when I drew the first wall, but I'll explain it now. But just so you know, this wall is 6.5 inches wide. That's called an outside wall. Inside walls are 4.5 inches wide. And these walls are 8 feet tall, or 96 inches. We do that again. 96 inches. Those dimensions come from this area right here on the project tab called Walls section. The wall height is 96, an outside wall is 6.5, and inside wall is 4.25. If, depending on your construction, you can change these to anything you want. But to select either an inside or an outside wall, I'll show you in a moment. But first I have to select the wall tool and click on my first point. All right, now notice that the cursor is a pencil, and in this case it's got a red bar under it. The red bar means hot, meaning an inside wall. But if I tap if I tap the Alt key, it changes to blue, which means cold or outside wall. And that's what I want. So now I have to find my first point. It's actually going to be in here someplace, and I can't see it. And I'm not lucky enough to click on it. So I could do one of two things. The most difficult thing to do is choose X-ray, find the point, click on it. The easiest thing to do is, instead of clicking on this point, click on this point. It's the same point, only 96 inches up along the blue axis. If I click on that, I'll then get the name, provide a wall name dialog box. I'll name it the north wall and say OK. And now notice as I drag it out parallel to the red axis, I get a wall that's outlined on the floor, even though I clicked on this point right here. Notice again, by the way, if I tilt this down, it's no longer red because it's not parallel to the red axis, but it is orange. That's a legal wall right there, as is that. But if I go back a tiny bit, it's not, and that's because that upper left corner would be outside the positive area. So this lets me know I'm on the red axis. I'm going to type 240, enter, and there's my second wall. Now my third wall is going to be my east wall, and it wants to be 223 inches from the inside of this wall. The inside of the east wall wants to be 223 inches from the inside of the west wall. Easiest way to do that is to temporarily give myself a construction line. 223 inches long. And I hope I did that right. I did. All right, so now I'm going to create the east wall. Now the east wall is an inside wall. So I'll hit Alt. Whoops, Oh, sorry, it was an inside wall to begin with, so I can leave that alone. It's a red wall, hot wall inside. So I'll come out here, and it wants to know the name. This is east wall. This time along the green. And the east wall wants to be 83 3/4 inches. Okay. But before I draw the south wall, let me get rid of this construction line. And look over here what I've got now. I've got 3 of the walls up, and one is called wall east, wall north, wall west. And as I promised, they are all grouped together. Keep your eye on that as we go through this model. That will be very handy. All right, now the next couple of walls are going to require some construction lines and a little construction work. But let's just start by drawing the south wall. The south wall is going to be an inside wall, and that's what we've got right now. And it's going to start at the origin, and it's going to come out 102 3/8 inches. So I'll start here, and that's going to be the south wall. And it'll come out 102 3/8 inches. Now I'm not too worried that it's overlapping because this is going to get cut off. You'll see that in a moment. I'm going to create another construction line, actually a construction point, and it's going to start from this point and go along the red axis in this direction, 36 inches. And that's going to be an intersection point for the southwest wall. And the southwest wall is going to be built at a 45-degree angle. So I'm going to add that. I'll hold the shift key down to lock in my protractor tool. I'll come out here and then around 45. And now I'm going to use the wall tool again. This time it's also going to be an inside wall. And I'm going to start here. And this is going to be southwest. It's going to be my southwest wall. And it's going to also intersect here. I can come out along this line. Any place on that construction line is fine. Notice that that is an illegal wall. Now, CabWriter doesn't stop you from drawing illegal walls. It just lets you know that you are doing so. So I can click here, and I have this very long wall. But not to worry, I'm going to fix that. So what I want to do is choose this wall, edit component, and create for myself a construction line parallel to that wall. And now I'll draw a line from that intersection to that intersection. And with the push-pull tool, I'll get rid of this part of the wall. Now notice right away that my axis for this part is over here by the origin. I want to move it over here. So the way I'll do that is, first of all, get rid of this construction line that I created. Leave Edit Component mode. Choose this wall and say Change Axis. And I'll click on that point, come out along the red, then I'll go back along the green. And there we go. Now I've got the correct bounding box. And if I go to Edit Component, notice my axis is here, not over here. All right, so that one's fixed up. Now the other thing I want to do is fix this one. Notice already it's got a really bad bounding box, but I'll fix that in a while. Let's edit this component. And if I'm not mistaken, well, let's do this. So what I want to do is take this line on this part, oh, I guess I have it. I've got it selected. I'm going to move it from here to here. And I'm going to take this line and move it from here to here. And while I'm at it, I'm going to draw a line from here to here. Now, by the way, that line is at an angle. It's not parallel to the red axis. Notice well, it's not going to let me. Oh, there we go. Notice that's parallel to the red axis, but that's not where they intersect. They intersect there, not there. So that's not exactly parallel to the red axis, which means that's not a 90-degree angle here. But we'll leave that up to the carpenters to figure out. Now what I can do, and by the way, the reason that's not at 90 degrees is because this is a 6.5-inch wall and this is a 4.5-inch wall, and that gives me a strange angle here. But that's okay. All right, now I've got to bring the axis in, and I've also got to correct for the bounding box. So let me do that in one fell swoop. Let me get rid of my construction lines. Since I created those while I was in Edit Component mode, I've got to delete them before I leave Edit Component mode. I'm going to change axis. And what I typically do is I take the longest dimension and make that the red. And then make the other dimension. Whoops. What did we do wrong here? Let me undo that. Let's do that again. That's better. All right, now one last thing we have to do is fix up this wall. And I'll get rid of this construction line. I'm going to do that by recreating this line again here. And again, notice it's not along the red axis, it's down here a ways. And again, I got to fix up the axis. And this one will be fairly easy. And there we go. All right, now I have my walls. I don't have my construction or my obstructions. What I'm going to do is bring in one window here and show you how I would do that. But I'm going to let you do the rest. So let me bring in the wall layout so we can see what we're trying to do. Okay, now since I am drawing exactly the same model that I've already drawn here, what I can do is just simply select these two windows. And I will edit using the edit menu, not right click, copy, or Control C, but I'm going to use the edit menu and say copy. And also, by the way, notice in this image that these have to be cut down here to 41 3/4 inches. So I'll do that in a moment. All right, so I've copied these. I can simply go to my other model now and go to Edit, Paste and Place. Okay, notice that the windows were put in here in exactly the same place because I used the Paste and Place as they were in the other model. And if I've drawn this model correctly, they'll be in the same place, which we'll check in a moment. One of the things I have to do is cut these walls down. So let me do that. All right, so what I'm going to do is make a mark that's 41 3/4 up from the floor, up along the blue axis. And now I'm going to edit this wall. And with the push-pull tool, I'll bring it down to 41 3/4. Now I can get rid of that construction line. Now, in order to bring this one down, what I've got to do is figure out where I want to bring it down. So I have a dimension that I got to come out 52 23/64. This is kind of a weird dimension, but it's a consequence of these two walls being different thicknesses. But I'll come out here 52 23/64. Right there. And so let me edit this wall. there's the guide point. There's the end, and that's 90. So I'll draw a line like this. I'm going to get rid of my construction line. And there we go. Now I've got what I want. Let me get rid of this while I'm at it. Well, it doesn't want to. There we go. And while I'm at it, I've got one over here too to get rid of. All right, so I've got that done. And that all looks correct. Now what I can do to fix up these windows is I can go around back here. Select this, edit, and I can use the rectangle tool. Start there, come through there. Push this all the way through to the other side. There we go. Now I have my window. I'll do the same thing to this other one. Whoops. I wasn't in edit component mode. And there we go. Now I have my walls. And at this point, I'm ready to do my first cabinet. Now, I don't have a floor here. I can add that anytime. I'll add it right now. What I'm going to do, I'm going to start at the origin, go to this back corner. I'm going to pull this down a couple of inches. Make sure you pull it down and not up. I'll just say 2 inches. And just for the heck of it, I'll pull this end piece out a little. That's not what I wanted. Doesn't matter how far. And there we go. Now I got to make that a component. And I'll just call it floor. And I'll give it the same instance name as the component name. And I'm going to put it on a floor layer. So I'll add an invisible layer at the moment. Call it floor. And put this on the floor layer. And there we go. Okay, so now my next part is to draw the cabinet I want to draw. And the way I start out is I start out with construction lines. You must have construction lines for drawing cabinets, or at least construction points, but I like to draw construction lines. And so the first one I'm going to draw is I'm going to start at this base of this wall, come out along the red axis, 24 inches. That's the depth of my base cabinets. I'll do the same thing here, 24 inches, this time along the green axis. And this is where my corner, where my cabinets are going to come together in this corner. Now I could draw construction lines on this wall and on this wall and on this wall, but that'll just clutter things up at the moment. Let me just stick with this for the moment. So the next thing I want to do is use the story stick tool to draw my cabinet. Now, as I said, this is going to be a 3-box cabinet. Here in the corner is going to be a Lazy Susan. Next to it is going to be a 3-draw bank. And next to that is going to be a standard base with draw. And then there's going to be an opening for a dishwasher. Now, the total length of my cabinet is 45 inches. I have to use the story stick to lay out where the cabinet begins. I'll start it here, and where it ends, over here someplace. Once I've done that, I can use the story stick to define the openings. So there'll be 2 openings, and between them will be a connector stile. So there'll be a connector stile here and a connector stile here. Now you'll see this as I go along. Only the first 2 markers, that's what they're called, markers, the one on this end and the one down here, 45 inches, will require my defining what those styles are. Every other style in a cabinet will be a connector style, so I don't have to tell CabWriter that they're going to be a connector style. So let's see what happens. I choose the story stick tool, create story stick, and I'll start here. I'll come out any distance as long as it's on the line. Doesn't matter how far I come out, as long as it says on the line. And I click. That brings up the end selector. The end selector will allow me to choose the type of style or treatment. If these are frameless cabinets and I'm not drawing styles, I'm really defining the type of treatment at the end of the cabinet. Well, this is going to be a Lazy Susan, and a Lazy Susan goes around the corner, and it's 90 degrees around the corner. So what I need here is I need a left pivot, and I'm going to make it a left pivot connector because I'll want to put some other cabinets over here that are going to connect to it. So I'll make it a left pivot connector. And I'll say OK. Now, since it knows the width of a left pivot connector, as soon as I hit OK, that'll bounce back to the dimension that's required. Now, I want to put another marker out here, 45 inches away. And by the way, 45 inches is the total length of the cabinet. So I can do that one of 2 ways. I can use the tape measure tool or stick with the story stick tool and push the control key twice. Watch what happens to the cursor. Once, I get a C, that's the centering tool. Twice, I get a D, that's the distance tool. So I can click on this point with the distance tool, come out any distance, do not click this time, just come out any distance, type 45 for 45 inches, enter. And notice it came back to here, which is 45 inches from this point. You can see that in the VCB if you look down in the corner. Okay, but now what I want to do is I'll just click any distance inside. Now it has to be inside, not out here, because this defines the outside of the cabinet on this end. This one defines the outside of the cabinet on the other end. So obviously I have to come in here, any distance, and click. And now I'll choose what I want out here. Notice all I can choose from are right connectors at this point. And I'm going to choose a right opening. Remember I said I was going to have an opening for a dishwasher. So I'll choose a right opening. CabWriter knows the width, so as soon as I say OK, it pops back to the correct width. All right, so now I want a 3-box cabinet. This box here is going to have a 15-inch opening. So I'm going to use the distance tool again by clicking twice on the control key. I'll start here because this is an opening now. I'll come out here, don't click, and I'll just type 15, enter, and it'll move that point to 15. Now since this is the opening going from here to here, I have to click on this side of the line. And notice when I click, I'm way out here. As soon as I click, it pops into the correct distance because it knows the distance. It knows the size of connector stiles. So now I click again twice. This one's going to have an opening of 13 inches, so I come out here on the line, don't click, type 13, enter. And since this is the opening, I click on this side of the line. Now this opening is going to be whatever's left. Now we can measure it. It's 11 inches. Okay. Now going back to the story stick tool until I get my markers, my red markers. So now I've defined the length of the cabinet from this point to this point. How I'm going to treat the cabinet at this end. This is going to be a connector style. And how I'm going to treat the cabinet at this end. This is going to be an opening style. And these are just connector styles connecting the boxes. At this point, I hit the end key, E-N-D. And that brings up the box selector. Notice the box selector makes these markers blue. That's because the very first marker I laid down was this one. The second one was this one. So I'm drawing this cabinet from left to right. Therefore, box 1 is here. And I want to make that a Lazy Susan. With one door. All right, this one I want to be a 3-draw bank or a draw bank base with 3 draws. And this one I want to be a standard base with draw. 1 draw. And 1 door. I click OK. I'm patient. I'm waiting for the cabinet. And there it is. Now, one of the things I want to explain, this style, if you remember, was a left pivot connector. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means I defined what the style is here. But that style actually pivots counterclockwise 90 degrees and then moves itself over here. All right, I'll say that again. It pivots itself from this position 90 degrees, so it'll be from here to here, and then it slides itself down here to line up here. So it is this style that I've defined here. And CabWriter knows to pivot it and slide it down here to put it in this position. So that's what pivot means. So anytime you have a pivot connector, you'll need pivot connectors for Lazy Susans and diagonal corner caps. But other than that, this is what we did. Now we can take some measurements just to make sure it did everything correctly. This opening From here to here should be 15 inches, and it is. This one should be 11 or 13 inches, and it is. And this one I would have to, create a line where these two come together and measure it, and it'll be 11 inches, trust me. Okay. Actually, you don't have to trust me. Let's see. Oh, I'm sorry. It'll be 11 inches plus an inch and a half. Because this moved out to this position, and this is an inch and a half wide. An inch and a half. So it'll be 11, this opening distance here, plus an inch and a half. And that's what it is. It's 12 and a half inches. Okay, so that's our first cabinet. Now, this took a lot of time because we had explained all the walls and all of the story stick details and what have you. In part 3, we're going to speed things up quite a bit. We've got the basics done now. Offline, I'll put in the plumbing construction or plumbing obstructions right here, and a few other little details, but I'll come back and we'll be ready to start with the next cabinets in part 3, and we're going to speed up quite a bit. We're going to start drawing multiple cabinets per video. So until part 3, have a good day.